If I'd got Talbot that night I'd have had the story, he adds. Then came the attack on me, apparently purposeless, and shortly after that the McMullen woman's story and the death of Holmes. Also Herbert had made that night examination of Mrs. Lancaster's room, and was convinced that she had been out of bed when at least the first blow was struck. In that case she might well have known that the money was gone and been killed to gain time until it could be placed somewhere in safety. The discovery of Emily's hidden room did only one thing to help solve the murder. A photographic enlargement of the blotter found there enabled Herbert to read on it the address of the house behind the library, and to enable him to examine the family history for a possible connection with the man Daniels. The only real brainstorm I had was right there, he says. There could be no logical connection between the two of them, on the facts. But she had written to him, and more than once. It was then that this story Jim had told about John Talbot popped into my mind. I got the details from Jim, but it was your Aunt Caroline, my darling, who remembered the date and the name under which he had been convicted. Which was not Daniels, by the way. After that I sent for old files of the newspapers where it had happened, and Aunt Caroline. Whatever made you go to her? Because, oh light of my life, your mother would not talk. Aunt Caroline, thank God, did not live on the Crescent. It was then that, being fairly sure of his ground, he went to see Daniels, or Talbot rather. But in the interval Lydia had disappeared, and Talbot's room was empty. And Talbot was Lydia's brother. Herbert found himself back once more to Lydia as the killer, although there was a chance that Talbot himself was guilty. If she could admit herself to the Lancaster house, she could have admitted him also. Then came Lydia's disappearance. Herbert had never for a moment believed that Lydia had been killed. To him it was a plain case of escape, and escape with sufficient money to last her the rest of her life. But how had she escaped? He says, there was that old bead bag of hers, found over on Euclid Street, and there was that damned butterfly from her hatpin. Why a hatpin if she wore no hat? I didn't believe she left without a hat. She would be too conspicuous. I suspected that she had a flat hat of some sort in that box along with the veil, and maybe a transformation too. And on Saturday morning I asked Lizzie Cromwell to see if all of Mrs. Talbot's transformations were in the house. They were not. One was missing, and Lizzie knew as well as I did what that meant. She told Mrs. Talbot and wanted the police notified. But you know your Crescent. She absolutely refused, and so that afternoon Lizzie simply packed her valise, put George's automatic into it, and went after Lydia herself. No one will ever know, I dare say, how Lizzie knew about that house at Hollytree. But no, she did, poor creature, just as she knew from Amanda on the Monday morning before that someone had washed clothing in the laundry the night before. And she found Lydia in the house when she got there. She knew her danger, and she followed Lydia's flight to that upper bathroom with George's automatic in her hand. When the bathroom door would not lock, things must have looked quite simple to her. She walked in, and Lydia probably hit her at once with a chair. However that may be, the one thing we do know is that in some such manner Lydia got the automatic from her and shot her dead. And that when her brother came back from burying the money, that is what he found. What could he do, Herbert says, except to give her a chance to escape? He helped her with the undressing, and to put her own clothing on the body. And it was he who took the drawers out of the trunk. Right there, however, I got my clue. For you see, my dear, that trunk, once the drawers were out, was large enough to hold the body. There was no real necessity for, well, for amputating that head. The only real reason I could see for such an act was to conceal the identity of the dead woman. The trunk was certain to be found, but with Lydia Talbot apparently inside of it, she was safe. I tried to tell Briggs that, but he wouldn't even listen. The rest is easy. While they were looking for a black-haired Lizzie, I was looking for Lydia Talbot, gray-headed and flat-voiced. But I couldn't find her, and so I sat down and tried to think what I would do if I were Lydia Talbot, waiting to make my escape when the time came, and with leisure now to worry about any clues lying around. It seemed to me that the album was still the danger point, if, as Lydia believed, my fingerprints were smeared all over it. Suppose on her disappearance her prints had been found in her room at the Talbot house, and then some day, long after she had made her escape, someone opened that album? Can't you see it? And not only that, but let them be found and identified, and that desperate expedient of the body in the trunk would fail of its object. Let her once be identified as the killer, and she saw the body exhumed and a worldwide search made for her. So he believed that she would, sooner or later, make her third attempt to get at the album. But not even Herbert until the last few hours suspected her of the audacious method she had used, both to get it and to hide herself from the police. For what she had done on that Sunday night was to slip back inside the Crescent itself, enter by a basement door to which she had hidden the key, confront her sister-in-law and tell her the truth. She knew the Crescent. Best of all, she knew her sister-in-law, her horror of scandal, and the fact that she had already learned from Lizzie Cromwell that Lydia was guilty.